Doctor Who is a very important show to me. It's a show that I hold very close to my heart. And I remember when Jodie Whittaker was announced to play the next Doctor, as well as Chris Chibnall being the next showrunner, and I was very excited for it. Looking back now, the hope was definitely misplaced, as Chris Chibnall has delivered what I feel is the worst era of New Who by a considerable margin, doing an incredible disservice to Jodie Whittaker, who's a fantastic actress, but who didn't really get much work within her run, making her performance as the Doctor quite underwhelming, bar like a scene or two. With that, one issue that has plagued this era, even from Series 11, but definitely became a big issue in Series 13, Flux, is queerbaiting, which will be the topic of this video. As many fans of Doctor Who will know, Series 13 and the 2022 specials focus on the relationship between the Doctor and her companion Yas, where, 2 episodes before the last ever episode of the era, Chris Chibnall confirmed the theory that many fans had, that Yas was in love with the Doctor, along with that episode introducing the fact that Yas didn't even know she was gay. Then, for some reason, outs her to the Doctor because Chris Chibnall thinks that's a good thing to do. But getting back to the point, as you may have noticed from what I said, the episode in which we get confirmation Yas has feelings for the Doctor is 2 episodes before her last, in the episode Eve of the Daleks. After that, we got the episode Legend of the Sea Devils, which did carry over from Eve, and address their relationship somewhat, which I'll get into soon, and then the final episode of the Chibnall era, The Power of the Doctor, with Mandip Gill, Yaz's actress, and Jodie Whittaker, the Doctor, both departing along with Chris Chibnall after that episode. This means that we had 2 episodes to deal with what Yaz being in love with the Doctor, along with knowing this Doctor would leave in 2 episodes, could mean. Chibnall and the cast members said many times that this romance between the Doctor and Yaz could only end in one way, in tragedy. Thasmin, which is their ship name, was always doomed because the Doctor isn't someone who can be tied down and have relationships, especially with humans. But we also knew that the Doctor would soon regenerate, so Yaz couldn't remain with the Doctor.
I feel like the story shape of it is really nice, but I think it feels right for the Doctor, adds Chris. Let's be honest, it's ultimately a doomed romance because the Doctor is not going to be the Doctor quite soon, you know? So really, it's designed to come to that point where it can't.
So, with 2 episodes to go after the reveal of Yaz's feelings, something most fans thought of, regardless of whether they liked this era or not, was about how Chris Chibnall could make a satisfying story that doesn't undermine Yaz's feelings for the Doctor in such little time, with so much left to address beyond Yaz, given what was set up with the Master's return in the last episode of the era, along with Daleks and Cybermen, as well as 2 companions from the classic era of the show returning for this episode, along with the daughter of a classic companion, Kate Stewart, showing up again. There was so much to deal with and only 2 episodes left, and the worries about not being able to properly address it were well-founded. With that, I want to get into the issue of queerbaiting. For starters, what is queerbaiting? It's hard to get one defining term for it, as many people have their own views on what it means, but the general consensus seems to be something like this.
Queerbaiting. What is queerbaiting? The term queerbaiting refers to the practice of implying non-heterosexual relationships or attraction in a TV show, for example, to engage or attract an LGBTQ audience or otherwise generate interest without ever actually depicting such relationships or sexual interactions. For example, a TV show may be accused of queerbaiting when interactions between 2 same-sex characters are consistently suggestive of sexual attraction or a sexual relationship, but the characters never actually enter into such a relationship, including and especially when their sexuality isn't otherwise discussed or betrayed.
I, for one, don't love this definition, but I think it's a decent definition for it. The definition basically that of depicting characters as potentially queer and hinting at their queerness without ever explicitly addressing it. One example a lot of people use is with Supergirl, Kara Danvers, and her best friend Lena Luthor in the CW Supergirl show. It is insane the amount of suggestions that they get together and that they were in love with each other there are in the show. Fans of Supergirl are right to be upset with the show trying to bait its LGBTQ+ audience by hinting that the show is queer positive, not just by having Alex Danvers' Kara's sister be gay, but by having Kara and Lena's relationship being hinted at for most of its run, only to never pay it off. To be perfectly fair, the show does have a lot of great LGBT representation, but it doesn't change the fact that Kara and Lena's relationship is massively queerbaiting. Now, from that definition and that example with Supergirl, I feel like you can probably tell the difference between what Doctor Who did and what queerbaiting is. Yaz's feelings and her queerness were made explicit. That's just a fact. We know she's attracted to the Doctor.
Have you ever told her how you feel about her?
Is it that obvious?
I spent 4 years travelling the world with you. I saw it then.
I've never told anyone, not even myself.
So it wouldn't really fall within the implying non-heterosexual relationships or attraction without ever depicting such relationships or sexual attractions, Because it's not just implied Yaz likes the Doctor, it's confirmed. And it's confirmed the Doctor likes her too in the next episode, Legend of the Sea Devils.
If I was going to, believe me, it'd be with you. I think you're one of the greatest people I've ever known, including my wife.
So the story isn't exactly queerbaiting, not by the definition I showed, which is partly why I don't like to use the definition for what I believe queerbaiting to be. But let's dive a little deeper and try to understand the issue with the Thasmin relationship. In Legend of the Sea Devils, the Doctor takes Yaz to the bottom of the ocean to investigate something relating to the plot of the episode. This is after she was told, in the last episode, about Yaz's feelings towards her, by the way.
She likes you.
I don't understand what you're saying, Dan.
I think you do. But for some reason, you pretend to me and to her that you don't.
And when they are at the bottom of the ocean, this is what the Doctor says.
Not a bad day, am I?
Now, the reason I and many other people were upset at this line is because it felt like, in-universe, the Doctor was queerbaiting Yaz by mentioning how they could be together, knowing Yaz is attracted to her, without actually talking to Yaz about it, only to later in the episode shut down the idea of ever getting with Yaz in the clip I showed earlier.
But the point is, if it was going to be anyone, it'd be you. But I can't.
Beyond that, at the end of Sea Devils, the Doctor mentions how she doesn't want to fix herself to anything or anyone because she's afraid it'll hurt when it ends, because it always does end. Basically, given this ending with one episode left and the Doctor saying right after it,
Can we just live in the present of what we have while we still have it? I wish this would go on forever.
It felt like it was set up for her to change her mind. I especially think it feels like a setup in the situation because the Doctor's just wrong. She has settled down before. She even mentions her wife, River Song, in this episode, which was her settling down with someone. The Doctor could potentially live a full life with Yaz until Yaz dies of old age, as the two are happy. Then the Doctor goes back to her adventures because she's a time traveler. She's basically immortal. She has all the time in the world to do this. Not to mention, Yaz even pointed out to the Doctor that it doesn't make sense for her to be so afraid.
My nanny says, courage is knowing something will hurt and doing it anyway.
It's clear the Doctor wants to be with Yaz, and Yaz wants to be with her. However, we need to find a way to make Yaz leave the Doctor by the end of her era, given she's not carrying over to the next episodes and era of the show. So we need to have the Doctor acknowledge her feelings and make the Thasmin fans happy by canonizing their love for each other in a concrete way, while also justifying Yaz's exit. However, once we got to Power of the Doctor, they basically ignored Thasmin altogether. When the Doctor's regenerating, there's a moment where she says she needs more time, and it does seem to be relating to wanting more time with Yaz. But then the Doctor says this to her.
It's been so special. You and Graham and Ryan and Dan and my hearts. They're so full of love of all of you.
This line from the Doctor really annoys me because it's not showing how Yaz is special to her. She's comparing Yaz to the other companions of this era, even though the Doctor had said in the previous episode that Yaz was one of the greatest people she's ever known, despite not really any relationship development to get to that point, but anyway. But now Yaz is as special as the other companions from this era, even though the only one the Doctor fell in love with allegedly is Yaz. This is basically discounting their relationship altogether. Like, imagine they hadn't mentioned Thasmin at all in the previous 2 episodes. I think this line would be way better because it wouldn't be ignoring an existing relationship and existing feelings the two have towards the other. It would simply be her saying goodbye to her only remaining companion, who she simply says I have to do this alone to.
I think I need to do this next bit alone. Let's not say goodbye.
Then lets Yaz go without saying goodbye and without Yaz having a say in the matter. To make matters worse, there's not a single moment of affection between the two shown in the episode, other than, I suppose, Yaz carrying the Doctor towards the TARDIS. There's not a kiss between them or even a hug. And guess what? There is a behind-the-scenes shot of Yaz and the Doctor hugging on top of the TARDIS during their goodbye scene, but that was not in the episode. It seems to just be a behind-the-scenes photo of the actors hugging that Doctor Who socials have used to try to continue to get Thasmin fans on their side, which has caused people to Photoshop it to look like the scene in the episode, because they're so starved for Thasmin content after being baited for so long. Which is another thing that annoys me, the way the Doctor Who social media team keeps pandering towards Thasmin fans by posting Thasmin fan art, for example, even though it is things that weren't actually in the episode. Speaking of that, in the scene where Yaz carries the Doctor to the TARDIS, many people have said that Yaz kisses the Doctor while she's unconscious, something that is both untrue and, even if it were true, it would be something barely visible. done for like 2 seconds without calling attention to itself by being very small in the frame of a very wide shot. Saying this is good is comparable to praising the lesbian kiss in The Rise of Skywalker. But this is just so indicative of the problem. There's so little in terms of queer representation within this era, especially in terms of Thasmin having relationship development, that people who want to defend this era will grasp at any straws to try to make it out to have been better than it was. That's largely how Chris Chibnall's writing worked throughout his era, where he likes to simply imply things for fans to headcanon anything they want, and to make his writing out to be better than it actually is, due to how little substance he's able to get across in his writing. And I'm not making this video to bash people who do headcanon Chibnall's writing, or who do want to believe Yas kissed the Doctor in that moment. I'm actually sorry for them. I hate how this is as good as it gets for them. But I also don't like it for myself, a queer person who wants to see good representation in one of my favorite shows, but I just simply haven't gotten it. I know I strayed a bit from my point, but what I want to say with this video is this.
So yeah, I do fully believe it's queerbaiting, and if you want to be really pedantic about it and say that you preferred the highly specific definition of queerbaiting and therefore this isn't exactly queerbaiting, it's something, and it's something that's not good.
Basically, whether you want to use the definition I shared, some definition that's more specific, or go by what I think queerbaiting is, where it's simply that it's hinting at a queer relationship and not properly paying it off or addressing it, like Yas and the Doctor's relationship was just hand-waved away and ignored in the final episode of the era, I don't think it really matters. I think it's bad anyway, what was done with Thasmin. You may want to say it's not queerbaiting, but I cannot, for the life of me, see it as good queer representation, or even something that did justice to Yas as a character, who had so little to work with that her one and only arc in over 3 seasons of content was this crush she has on the Doctor, which was just ignored in the finale. I also don't think you should use definitions, seeing as queerbaiting doesn't have one universally agreed upon definition, or right definitions, around something you like. It should be a definition you can apply without prejudice, one that always aims at targeting and criticizing things that need better representation. In conclusion, the reason I have an issue with the way Chibnall treated his queer fans, and I do consider it queerbaiting, is his lack of addressing the one and only meaningful character conflict established for his longest-running companion, and the longest-running companion in the history of the show for that matter, as if she's not important, as if the first ever queer relationship with the Doctor in the history of the show isn't important enough to be addressed, as if leading them on until the ultimately pointless conclusion was somehow good queer representation.
It wasn't part of the plan, Chibnall says. You're in constant dialogue with the show because you see things come through and you think, that's interesting, we can slow burn that. And that's sort of what happened with this. If you look at Arachnids in the UK, 2018, it's there front and center in the scene where Yaz's mum asks, "Are you two seeing each other?" And the Doctor says, "I don't think so." Are we? Later in the episode, when Yaz describes the Doctor as the best person she's ever met, we notice the real intensity to Mandip's performance. It started to read on screen, maybe partly because of Jodie and Mandip's friendship off screen, but partly because it just came through. We started making very deliberate decisions in terms of costume and started laying some things in.
I feel like queer Doctor Who fans, especially people who were invested in Thasmin, deserve better and should demand better. However, I do imagine we are getting better from the following era, with Russell T Davies returning to the show as showrunner. And Russell is someone who's very passionate about queer stories, and has made his career around writing stories about being queer or based on his own experiences as a gay man, present in even his era of Doctor Who, explained really well in this video by Verily Bitchy. Russell T Davies returning to the show has already cast the first ever mainline Black Doctor, who's also the first actor not born in Britain to play the Doctor in the show's canon, as well as the first trans companion with Yasmin Finney playing the character Rose in the 60th anniversary specials, as well as the first ever companion who has impaired mobility in Wilf's return to Doctor Who for the 60th anniversary. Russell is known for being a very vocal supporter of the queer community, and his outspokenness about his politics and about issues minorities face is already clearly being shown in his second era of the show. So it does leave me hopeful that we will get much better queer representation going forward. Thanks to Russell, I do finally have hope for the future of Doctor Who, especially that it'll get away from Chibnall's worst traits as a showrunner, him being unable to properly write queer and minority characters' struggles being the main one. As Russell has shown, he's extremely capable of writing those stories.
They don't think that it's tuberculosis.
Then what is it?
What do you think it is?
Thank you very much for watching, folks. I'd like to shout out the channel Who Cares and their video on Power of the Doctor and their Tragedy of Yas videos, which were a huge help in crafting the arguments for this video, as well as that clip I used from their video of Astra summarizing my thoughts perfectly on the way queer people have been treated by this era. I'd also like to thank Shandy for lending me his voice for a few moments in this video. His channel is in the description and I highly recommend his content. I also linked a Digital Spy article in the description that interviewed Chris Chibnall about this topic, and I think it is a very good article that talks about the failures of the Thasmin relationship in their final episode. With that, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.